Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening for our panel discussion. My name is Cecily Jackson Zapata. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Directors of Social Enterprise Alliance Los Angeles. And we are the Los Angeles chapter of a national membership organization that serves social enterprises and individuals and organizations that work in that field. Many people have a variety of definitions of social enterprise, but and even within the Social Enterprise Alliance family, there are often big discussions as to whether something constitutes a social enterprise or not. But some of the hallmarks that we identify as a social enterprise is an organization, whether it be nonprofit, for-profit, or one of the new hybrid entities, and that organization exists because there is some kind of overarching societal ill, some kind of issue that the people in the organization are coming together in an effort to solve. And typically in a social enterprise, when you have people coming together to try to solve that issue, they're employing some kinds of business techniques a typical for-profit entity use, but the social enterprise does it a little bit differently because they're employing those tactics in an effort to solve a problem, in an effort to increase the sustainability of that social enterprise to be able to meet greater needs and to serve more people and to hopefully eradicate the issue that the social enterprise was created to solve. So that's my basic take on social enterprise, and everybody has their own ideas. So I look forward to hearing from all of you about each of your organizations. And so just a little bit about Social Enterprise Alliance. We are the Los Angeles chapter. It's a national membership association. They have an annual summit, and then every other year they do regional summits. Last year we actually had a summit here in Los Angeles over at the Cathedral in downtown. And they also offer for their members free webinars every month and a large number of resources that are available on the website and consulting services. And so if you do have a social enterprise, you might want to look at Social Enterprise Alliance because it's a large and growing organization, and there are a number of people here in Los Angeles who are involved in the chapter, and it's been growing pretty tremendously. And so we would love to have everybody involved. You can let me know if you have any other questions about that. So now what I'm just going to ask each of you, if you want you can go in a row, if not, if somebody wants to go first, to introduce yourself, to talk a bit about your organization in general, and then if you can talk about the social enterprise aspect of your organization and maybe why you decided to employ those types of techniques and how it's working. Maybe we can have a conversation, but who wants to start? This side or that side?
I'll start. So I'm Sandrina Bullitt. I'm with SOLA Food Co-op, and SOLA stands for South Los Angeles Food Co-op. And the co-op was pretty much bred in 2011 in the summertime by Bonnie Turpin. She's the founder of the co-op. And it pretty much is bred out of the need to have more natural foods, more organic foods, more non-GMO foods in the South LA community. Granted, there's a lot of food in South LA, but there's not a lot of healthy food that will pretty much really provide that good nutrition that we need as a community. So Bonnie gathered together some of her friends and was putting the word out like, hey, let's create a food co-op that we can all become members and we all have ownership in this store in the community. So with that said, it's been about 2 years, almost going on 3 years now, that we've just been, as a steering committee, planning and working to come up with our business plan. We started off with a feasibility study, but working to get that off the ground first. But really the need is to have more sustainable food in South LA, because so many people drive 3, 7, 10 miles outside of the community just to get healthy food. And we're like, no more. And we're taking ownership of our health and also the economic viability of South LA.
Okay, hi, I'm Mike Blockstein from Public Matters. So Public Matters is a social enterprise made up of artists and educators and media professionals, and we do kind of very long-term neighborhood-based media / education / civic engagement projects. Kind of in terms of this conversation, we also do work around healthy food access, program we call Market Makeovers, which is, you know, kind of, it's not your typical corner store conversion. It's to us, it's all about, you know, doing things which are pushing towards sustainability and community engagement and community buy-in. So we do a lot of work with actually high school students and youth and engaging them in the whole process and training them to be community health leaders and educators. And in terms of Public Matters and kind of the whole social enterprise thing, I mean, in some ways we're a social enterprise, I would say, by default, because I've run a nonprofit before, and having done that, I wanted nothing to do with that model ever again. And so, you know, I studied a little bit, you know, around social enterprises and social entrepreneurship, but I would say we pretty much just kind of just forged ahead, and we're an LLC. We're not a typical social enterprise, not that there are typical social enterprises maybe, but in the sense that our product is still really a service. We're doing program, we're doing program design, we're actually the ones who implement the things. So it's not as if, say, we were, you know, originally we thought, oh, well, we'll be a bunch of consultants and we'll help these things get set, but actually we're a group of people who like to get our hands involved in things and do things. So we're actually providing the services. So it's, you know, it's not like we're selling water and then that funds something else.
Hi everyone, my name is Neelam Sharma. I'm with Community Services Unlimited. I'm currently the Executive Director. Community Service Unlimited, we also call CSU, was created in 1977 as a non-profit by the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party. The party, for many reasons, ceased to exist, and the very wise founders of it and the non-profit decided to keep the non-profit structure intact and to continue to do what they could to serve the neighborhood of South Los Angeles. Over the years, what CSU does has changed. Our mission and vision has been reformed on several occasions, with the most latest incarnation really being in the late 1990s, where we were doing work around doing work in local schools in South LA, really that was to kind of bring our communities together, the Black-brown communities together around a lot of issues that were happening at that time in our schools, in the prisons, and that were then overflowing into the streets in South LA. We had a program that was really designed to bring Black-brown students together. So anyway, long story short, that work led us to be directly engaged with young people in the school system who were just, you know, drugged out on sugar, really, to put it like that's the best way I can put it, and couldn't sit still, couldn't learn, and we began to really think about how can you actually engage young people who are not nourished, right? So that work led us to doing a lot of instruction and creating some programs in that program around young people really looking for themselves at what they were eating and how that was impacting their lives. That led to a community food assessment in 2003 that actually led to all the work that we currently do. It was an amazing project where we engaged, you know, almost 1,000 community members. It's a completely unfunded project, and it was really a way of us kind of learning what was happening in the neighborhood, but all of us engaged in it lived in the neighborhood, so we kind of knew. It was a way of collecting some data, but more importantly, it was a way of engaging local people in thinking about what change they wanted to see and getting them engaged in creating that change. So the social enterprise that we have has grown out of this work. We have a series of programs called the Community Food Village that does everything from working with pre-kindergartners all the way up to high school kids and post-high school in programs around nutrition, health, growing food, all of that sort of stuff. But in addition to that, we do free community gardening workshops, free nutrition classes, just generally for people of all ages in our community. And what has resulted from the local growing and the local urban farms we've created is that we had a lot of food that we needed to do something with. So we decided to try and build an income for ourselves. Our work is really centered around, the best way I can explain it is the Black Panthers back in the day, you know, they were about meeting people's immediate needs, right? Folks were hungry, they were starving, they didn't have the basic needs of life, right, at that time. And a lot of the things that we now see that the government owns, that a lot of churches own, free food giveaways, you know, the federal breakfast and lunch program, these were actually innovations created by the Panthers. They didn't exist at the time. The sickle cell testing, there's a lot of stuff that people don't connect to the Panthers that is totally connected to them. But you know, now there's a lot of other people doing that stuff better than we could do it as a little entity. So we've had to look at, well, what is our role in the current situation? And really for us, it's about continuing to serve the people body and soul the way the Panthers always did, but not by meeting their immediate service needs, but more so by really building the skills in our community for people to serve themselves. So our social enterprise has come about as a result of wanting to build sustainability in our neighborhood around food, while at the same time we build sustainability as an organization, knowing that this current trend and you know, fashion of food and issues around obesity is a trend. We understand that because we study history, we study systems, we study the ebb and flow of these things, and we know that we have to build our own income so that we can support the very important work that we do in South LA. And the form that it takes is we are a nonprofit, we're a 501c3. Our nonprofit, our social enterprise, the Village Marketplace, is directly connected to the mission and vision of our nonprofit. Therefore, currently, we don't have a separate legal structure for it because we are okay in the legal guidelines that exist out there. At some point, we probably, once our income gets to, in fact, it's going to be pretty soon because we're, thank goodness, touch wood, very successful at what we're doing right now. So we probably will have to create some kind of separate legal structure. Right now, it falls under our current nonprofit. Thank you. It's wonderful. It's great to hear.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Frank Tamburello, and I'm Executive Director of Hunger Action Los Angeles, or Hunger Action LA. And we're a nonprofit organization consisting of a coalition of many other nonprofits, in addition to many of the low-income residents that they serve. And we've been around for 7 years now, and we actually have three general program categories. The first one, for which we're best known, is the public policy advocacy and organizing. So every year we're educating the nonprofit staff and low-income residents about current food policies, usually on the state level, but sometimes on the federal and city level as well, that are going to impact them, and train people how to speak to their public officials about those, and then make that intersection happen with the officials. A second one is the People's Guide to Welfare, Health, and Other Services, also known as the Red Book. And this book is a guide to all kinds of resources, but as a form of 3D advocacy and promotion in itself. In other words, this is an example of a public policy. Our federal government doesn't invest in fruits and vegetables. In the agricultural sector, as it's well known, they invest in grains and meats and in a lot of the food that are making people sick all over the country with diabetes, obesity, and other diet-related illnesses. So this is sort of a public policy statement or an example that can be shown to public officials of how subsidizing fruits and vegetables can actually lead people to a healthier diet, especially in low-income areas where, as we all know, access to these foods is more difficult for a variety of reasons. And that sums up what Hunger Action LA is doing.
Thank you. And I know, Sola, you're very new, although you have been around for almost 3 years now. And I know that you've already partnered with CSU, and you have partnered with other organizations here as well. You have, I'm not surprised to hear that. But I'm curious to hear, as a theme that you've mentioned, is that, I mean, what we always talk about, or we hear a lot in our social enterprise world, about how that this field is growing and more people are becoming engaged, and more young people, and a lot of entrepreneurs are rethinking the way that they are approaching their work. But it seems like often you have food-related organizations that crop up in this area because it seems like a very natural relationship. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you've seen in the time that you've been working specifically with food. I mean, you can talk about social enterprise if you want, but just kind of the changes, because it really feels like, Neelam, like you're saying, you read history, you understand that this is a real trend. Do you think that this is something that's here to stay and that's only going to continue to grow? And how do you see how do you see your organizations changing to grow and meet new needs? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer, but I don't want to, necessarily take. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's something we've talked about a lot. That given who we are, our history, not just as an organization, but many of the individuals that have come to work with CSU, volunteer with CSU, be around. Our histories are very much like rooted in communities from somewhere. Clearly I'm not from South LA, but I'm from somewhere, a very similar community, and we also kind of very much grounded in traditional kind of social justice work. Right, so to us, this issue of food is very much an issue of social justice. That's the first thing I'll say. And I always think whenever I'm asked questions about this thing, that an image that very strongly, and it was in my head just now, that always crops in my mind. I don't know if you guys remember when Clinton was president, and for one very public kind of event, and I can't remember what it was, but he came out and he was wearing a hat with a big X on it, depicting Malcolm X. And, it was kind of like, look at that, the President of the United States promoting the ideas of, not actually promoting the ideas of Malcolm X, but, using the X image, who would have thought, and how blasphemous in many ways is that, right? And so it's a similar thing, I think. So it's not that we hope that many people will not just kind of see this as a fad and be over it, right? But we also know there's a way in which the system that we currently live in, the system of economic production, it assimilates ideas and movements and progressive thought. There's a way in which, I mean, if you look at even the movement that we directly come out of, the Panthers and the 60s, I mean, if you actually look at what many of those folks from back in that day, from the civil rights movement, from the folks around King to the Panthers, I mean, they're either dead, in prison, exiled, or many of them have been assimilated. They're actually elected officials. They're congressmen and city councilmen, and and they've been brought into the system in some way, right? And so this idea of the X, there's a way in which the system we live in, the folks who write history, the folks who get to put out the images in the media about what is real and what really life is about, and who create those trends, there's a way in which progressive ideas are assimilated constantly. So we understand that, and so we know that we're in this moment, where this is actually a fad right now, and everyone's talking about it, and that's great, right? So we're trying to make the most of it that we can for what we're trying to do, but understanding that as well as having its sort of benefits, there's also a lot of things about that are not so great, that are actually quite challenging in terms of the way that this issue is seen, the way that it's, the way that it's, how should we put this, the way that it's, what's the word, popularized, right? The way these issues get popularized. So I don't know how many of you remember a few weeks ago, there was this big thing in the New York Times, I think it was, about how organic foods are actually no different from any other foods, right? And and who promoted that survey? Who had that? So there's a way in which that trend, we know, can easily be actually turned and shifted, right? So we're trying to take hold of this moment, but also knowing that really the kind of work that we're interested in doing, that we're engaged in doing in South LA, isn't about fashions and fads. It's about a commitment to longevity, a commitment to sustainability, and really, ultimately, that work has to come from the community, be owned by the community, and be seen as being their, you know, like it's their product, right? So what we're creating are jobs for local people in our neighborhood that are really seen as being owned by that neighborhood. So I think that's, you know, I don't want to take up all the time, but I think those are some of the trends that we've seen that you know, like I said, they're good, but they're also problematic because there's a way in which the issue gets diluted all the time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that out of the 12 farmers markets we're working with, it's within the last year. All of them are operated by young entrepreneurial types who have considered it a core part of their mission to serve low-income families. So this is an interesting thing that they've integrated right from the start, the idea of their business with the idea of serving people. And two things that are connected with that, on this food issue in particular. One is that right now there's more Americans getting supplemental nutrition assistance program, commonly known as food stamps, than ever before in history. It's double the number that there usually is. It's about 1 in 7 Americans. It's like 47 million people. So this is becoming very common that people need supplemental income for food in America. And so I think it's going to be for a while. People are saying that the current state of unemployment is going to be the new norm. So I think that part of you know, the idea of serving low-income people is going to be a part of people's mission, if for no other reason than that a significant segment of the population is going to continue to need assistance. On the other side, I want to point out that the idea that that a low-income population wouldn't want to shop at a farmer's market, that it's a kind of a bourgeois thing. In 2008, there were only 50 markets in California that accepted the EBT card, the CalFresh card, and they did about $650,000 worth of sales in EBT. 2 years later, the number of markets had doubled, more than doubled. It was at 111, but the number of benefits had quintupled to $3.5 million. So because a lot of people are becoming poor who previously were not, and also because there's just generally more consciousness being generated about nutritious food, this is something that's not just a trend. I think it's not just a fad. It's going to be an ongoing trend. And I think that social entrepreneurship is only going to grow as the economic situation continues like this in the United States.
I would like to add to both points that were just talked about. Even in my experience in SOLA, we've done a number of local community, the idea of what a food co-op is, what SOLA intends to do, the importance of having organic, natural food in the community, and just hearing from people's experiences is definitely a lot about, it's a social justice issue, having the lack of nutritious food in the community. And also it's the discussion recently has become around like an economic issue as well. You know, why aren't we keeping the money that we're spending outside of our community? Why aren't we keeping it inside of our community? And from doing studies and stuff, there's over $500 million of what we call retail leakage that leaves out of South LA because people are traveling, like I said, 10 miles to go to their Trader Joe's or their Whole Foods or to a Sprouts or something like that, where in the local community you don't have that. You know, and so people are getting tired of, you know, having to drive so far, you know, and there's a major demand, especially for like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods to come into the community, but they're saying, no, you know, you guys will drive to us, so why should we have to come into your community and put a store here? You guys are just going to drive to us anyway. You know, so me being a young person, I'm like, well, what's the mindset of the leadership of these corporations? You know, we're begging, demanding them, oh, come here, come to my neighborhood, come to my neighborhood. Well, we shouldn't have to wait to change the minds of, you know, these corporations. Why can't we create a food system ourselves within our community, run it ourselves, and, you know, circulate the money within our community to increase the economic status of where we live? And even speaking to going back into the 60s, you know, how the social uprising led to a lot of grocery store owners leaving South LA area, going into the suburbs, and them to never return. And there's only a handful of full service grocery stores in South LA. There's less than 10. And now it's like we're in 2013 and we're still seeing this lack of grocery stores and lack of food availability in the community, but now we have this overabundance of fast food restaurants everywhere. And this is supposed to be our food staple for our community, because grocery store owners or corporations or whatever don't see South LA as a viable market. They don't see or believe that there's money in our community to be made, which there is a ton of money to be made, and there's a demand for it. And people, even looking into the health aspects, the rise of obesity and diabetes and all these chronic diseases that are preventable through nutrition, people are recognizing the connection between chronic disease and the foods that we're putting into our bodies. So if a person realizes like, hey, I know that if I change my diet, then I can prevent diabetes long term, or becoming obese, or having a stroke or heart disease long term. But if I don't have the access to that within a mile radius of my neighborhood, what am I going to do? So that's where SOLA comes in, our role in the entire issue of social justice and economic justice situation, even health justice specifically, looking to provide South LA community with those more nutritious resources in the form of natural, organic, non-GMO food sources in the community.
And if you just look at the notion of why social enterprises or social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs try to do things, it's because they're trying to figure out a different way to do something. And quite frankly, the reason why there's a push and why there seems to be more awareness is because clearly the system itself isn't providing what people would like it to, right? And that means health, it means access, it means just basic things, right? But it also means education. And I think for us, a lot of where we put our time and our is in education, because I think that it's one thing, say, to think, oh great, well, if we just had a food truck and it came and drove around and it delivered things, who's going to know to buy from the food truck? Who's going to know what to buy? Who's going to know how to prepare the foods? Who's going to have the incentive to do that, as opposed to buying something that you're used to buying all your life, or that you feel is cheaper, or that, well, why don't I need junk food? That all those things by themselves are huge, and they take time, and they take and so I think the more ideas that come forward, the better. But I think that in terms of, if you were to look at things right now, it's just that things are building, and I think there's a much greater awareness, there's a much greater motivation, but it's still in the early stage. I don't think that necessarily there hasn't been a major kind of breakthrough, or oh my gosh, this model works so well, because everybody is looking for alternatives and trying different things, and that's kind of the nature of entrepreneurship in itself.
A common theme that relates to, I believe, all of your organizations, and then also with Lunch Lady Courage, the Cornerstone show that is opening tonight, something that I keep hearing about is youth and the involvement of young people. And then so we're talking about how we've got this sea change that's happening now, and is it a trend? Is it here to stay? Does it really have that strong foothold where we can say that we feel like our communities and our relationship to food will be transformed through this work and this awareness? But I'm wondering if you could speak a bit, especially since the play tonight is really highlighting the role of students and young people in their relationship to nutrition and food, and transforming the way that they relate to it, and how you feel that that might have an impact overall on this trend. If you think it's, although it's really happening, it might still be just kind of a drop in the bucket. Any kind of ideas about you?
Well, I would just like to highlight something. I was watching the news in the morning last week, and there was a brief segment on there about McDonald's and their new campaign, putting out this new chicken wrap sandwich or something, and they're trying to target the young Generation X, because they're pretty much in a frantic, apparently, because they've lost sales and to this group of young people, and they're like, why aren't they buying market certain food items to Generation X? And I thought that was pretty profound. When I was looking at that piece, I was like, wow, people are waking up, young people are recognizing the importance of nutrition or eating or having healthier alternatives to eat. So that alone, I think, speaks to the young people and possibly, their awakening of nutrition and the importance of it. Also, I know that there are a lot of, specifically SOLA has not worked directly with youth as of yet, but in my experiences thus far, talking to young people about what they eat and what kind of options that they have in their schools, a lot of them say, well, I don't eat the school lunch because it's nasty, and it takes forever to try and get into the line in the cafeteria, and by the time I get up there, the bell rings, I gotta go to class again. Or they'll just say, I'll eat some chips or even hot Cheetos instead for their lunch, but they don't have any desirable options when they're in school, and they know this, but it's like, well, what do you do about it, or how do I go about resolving that issue? So I think in the heightened stage of this, what we call food movement or awareness of health and the role that nutrition plays on our health, people are becoming definitely more aware, and young people really want to get involved. Like, people are hungry. We have kids where I work, there's high schools coming to us saying, do you have a project for us related to food? I know you guys did this policy brief on this food issue. How can we get involved? What can we do with you guys? We had some Cal State Northridge students come to us, and they shot a video about fast food in West LA and contrasted it with food options in South LA. They just completed it over the past weekend. So it's building quickly, and people just really want to get involved and become involved and have a say in, hey, this is what I want to put in my body. You can't tell me what I have to put in my body. I have a choice, and I have ownership over my life and my health.
So well, we've been doing market makeovers, and which involves work with high school students for 7 that we go through in terms of a curriculum, and is first we start talking about food deserts, food justice issues, things that are, on the one hand, something that the students kind of know by default, but on the other hand, they know nothing about. But that's a way to start to get them kind of interested and pique their interest, and kind of, as a teenager, you tend to see things very much either like, well, it's like this or like this. So it's a good kind of like entry point in terms of that. Then we move into media production, and we make media around issues related to the food environment where they live. After that, we talk about healthy eating and nutrition, and it's something that by and large teens know next to nothing about. And there's a tremendous amount of, they can never stop asking enough questions because they don't know anything about it, and they're dying to know. And that's also an age when they're very body conscious, and it's something that food connects to all that. We move from there. We actually do media literacy, and we specifically look at advertising from the food and beverage industry. so that they understand, well, part of why you eat what you eat is because you're being told to eat those things whether you understand it or not. But because they've already made media, they understand the process of how those things are put together. It's not until then that they actually start to do things in terms of, because the other part of what we're doing is we're transforming local markets to have healthier food choices, but they need all that kind of background in order to be kind of like both, I think, engaged, but also feel some sense of understanding what's going on. So it's not just simply like, okay, great, here's the fruits and vegetables, okay, but, and honestly, I mean, we've had students who, some of them like completely transformed their diets, they talk to their parents, their families change their diets, but we also still see students all the time, even the ones who are out there talking to other students or other people like, wow, you shouldn't eat this, do that, but they're grabbing the bag of Cheetos, or they've got the bag of chips or this candy, whatever it is. I mean, these things are really deep and they're ingrained, and we know they're addictive, and it's going to be an ongoing kind of effort. And I think that right now I think of it more it's the consciousness raising level. It's not like point where everybody has access, everybody has the choices, everybody has the information. We're not close to there. We can work with a small number of students, and we hope that those students then talk to their peers, their families. We see that happening, but this has to happen on a massive scale if we're really going to talk about some real kind of social change, and also the proper education that I think young people need to have about what they're eating and consuming.
Yeah, so we've seen a heightened interest among college kids in advocacy and policy, particularly to learn that some of these decisions are being made without consulting people as to who can get access to food, as to what kind of foods get subsidized, and as to how these things are promoted and marketed. So they've shown a heightened interest when we go around and talk to college students. More than want to volunteer and take part in our advocacy. Some of the nutrition students want to come out and help with the market match and so on. And also their use of social media too enables them to connect very easily and quickly with others in their age group about some of these issues. Now another group we should talk about is the very, very, very young, that is kids under 5. And so you see a lot of parents nowadays, we see a lot of them coming to the farmer's market, and they'll say, well, the food here is a little more expensive than at the place down the street, but we know that this food is better. It's of higher quality. There weren't any pesticides used or chemical fertilizers when it was grown, and we want our kids growing up eating the very best stuff. We don't want them eating on candy and junk food. They're gonna eat strawberries if they want something sweet. And so you see a lot of heightened awareness among this generation of parents. So it's coming from that middle generation on down to the very youngest now.
Yeah, and I mean, young people have always been a cornerstone of the work that we do. It actually began, the community food assessment was staffed by 5 high school interns, 11 middle, designed and created the tools of that assessment, and did the surveying and assessing along with other folks. And we've seen that trend grow. So one of our first programs that was created was Growing Healthy, which works with young people within the school setting to not just train young people how to grow food and how foods are nutritionally beneficial, many of the things you described, but also all the sort of marketing of food, like how food's marketed to them, all that kind of stuff. And they create surveys and create projects to look at that stuff. But also coming on the tail of that very, very quickly was the program From the Ground Up, which kind of organically emerged out of the Growing Healthy program, which is targeted towards slightly older kids. And it was really kids coming to us saying, you're working, or coming and actually working with us in building the urban farms we were building in South LA, and saying, well, we've been doing this with you, can we get paid? And so these kids and so gradually that's how that program grew. Paying stipends initially. The first year that we operated the From the Ground Up program, we had 3 young people go through that program. Very rigorous program that trains you. Not only is it hard work, You know, it's literally like working in the sun, growing food, working with the dirt. But it's all, everything that goes with that. What do you then do with that food? How do you market that food? You know, how do you save seeds? How do you propagate? All that stuff. We had, in the last year we operated the program that we have numbers for, we had 50, in 2011 we had 50 young people. So we've grown in a very small, and our very conscious intention was, when we started to do this work, was to create a pool of very knowledgeable, very grounded youth in our neighborhood who knew about these issues and who could do this work. So that we could then build on that, you know, leverage that and build on that to actually create something really sustainable and long-term in terms of the beginnings of a food system in South LA. But, and I have to come back to this issue, you know, and these are the things that make me unpopular generally with people, but I've got to come back and say this, that this issue of, you know, whether this question of food and obesity and everything is here to stay or whether it's a fad. And I have to say that I think the issue is not whether it's a fad amongst those people whom it affects, because of course it isn't, right? Like, you know, we all need to eat, and the fact is that, you know, we've been saying for years, in opposition to many of the expert nutritionists and dietitians, that people in our neighborhoods know there's a problem. They're not stupid, you know, they don't like give themselves diet-related illnesses because they're idiots. It's because of the environment that's been created in that neighborhood. It's because of long-term, you know, lack of investment. In fact, long-term disinvestment is actually what's happened in places like South LA. Despite all the bullshit and the promises since the rebellion, that's actually what's happened. There's a net decrease of grocery stores where you can buy food that has any, you know, quality. And even those grocery stores that exist, countless surveys have been done, they have lower quality and higher price, right? So people in our neighborhoods are not stupid. They know there's an issue. They're you know, captured in a very particular environment, many of them struggling with 2 or 3 jobs to earn a living, and on the other hand, some folks living on benefits and not really having the know-how or the wherewithal to do what they need to do to feed their families well, right? So there's a specific environment that's been created. It's been created over a long period of time, and there isn't going to be any magic bullet or one thing that is going to remedy that environment. It's going to be a long-term, sustained effort from every single angle to deal with that effort. And the issue is not whether this issue is then going to suddenly become of less importance to those of us whom it actually affects day to day, right? The issue is whether it's going to become less of a fashion in the media, right? Because there has been this media interest, this interest by foundations, this interest by corporations. I was reading the other day that organic produce is one of the only growing industries in the US. That almost everything else is failing, is what's the opposite of growing in financial terms? I don't remember. Shrinking, thank you. And almost every other industry is shrinking. The growth of organic produce is one of the only growing industries in this country. So clearly there's an understanding and an interest in this, right? But my belief is that I don't think in terms of sort of the public sphere, right, that this is going to remain an issue that people are going to continue to put the attention on that they are, and I don't think that the funders, I don't think that money, I think that money's there for a minute, right, and that's not always going to be there, and I think that, you know, one of these things that we all pointed to, all the proliferation of these projects is great, and there's some really cool work being done, right, cool projects being created and so on and so forth. What I always look to is what is being set up for long-term sustainability in a community. Because what we continue to see, and my argument is, almost all the other nonprofits I see out there doing this work, they're hiring white middle-class students coming out of universities. I mean, I'm sorry, all this money that's coming in, so-called, you know, like places like South LA being pimped because of the food environment, this money is not ultimately benefiting places like South LA. That's the problem that I have with this, right? It's the same way that, you know, the education corps was set up, and you see these educational projects where, you know, young white middle-class amazing people. Many of them come and work with us. I have no argument with them as individuals. They can come work with us anytime and we put them to work, right? But all this money in education, for example, has been put into bringing these folks into urban settings to give them a year of doing some core work, some educational core work. They then go away and they're back to their careers, and nothing is changing as far as education in our communities.
They do performances, they do the advocacy, they also have to learn how to put together events, whether it's a cooking demo, whether it's a presentation. They're responsible for learning all stages of how to do that as a high school student. So that means conceive the idea, figure out how to do it, think about what supplies you need, learn about cooking, learn how to promote it, then get out there and do it in front of an audience. That for a high school student, that's not your typical kind of like high school type class, right? But this is what we actually do with the class within a high school. So, but their education is extended from the school directly out into the community, because I agree that, you know, it has to be creating an opportunity and an ability to have something which grows from within and sustains from local.
Yeah, so all that you're saying, it's funny because as you were saying, I'm like, to me there was a great tie back to social enterprise and employing social enterprise in this particular area, in that you're giving all of these amazing skills to the people who are participating in your programs and are benefiting from the programs, all this education, but also a number of skills that they can use in their own lives. But then also you're employing these strategies that will increase the sustainability regardless of whether the funders and the television cameras and the celebrity chefs, you know, all pack up and move on to something else. Right. And so it's a really wonderful way that you can employ that strategy to really dig those roots in these communities right at the heart of it. Thank you. Are there any questions? Any other questions from anybody in the panel?
No, we'd just like to thank all of you for being
here.
Sticking with us.
Yeah. I'll just actually say that the theme of this year's Earth Day South LA, which is this coming Saturday, I will completely, like, unashamedly advertise this event, is growing our own for this very reason, because that's what our focus has been the last couple of years. And I'll also say that in last our income for our organization, 30% of it was from our earned income from our social enterprise.
Wow.
And we're hoping local youth have been through our internships and apprenticeships. We're hoping to create another 5 in the next year. So, you know, it's a drop in the ocean, like somebody said, but it's a big, you know, important where does it go from there?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the sustainability. That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thanks so much for your contributions.
Thanks for having us.